travels may take you. It should be safe and filled with blessing, hatzlacha, and all in your endeavors. Okay, today's class is actually sponsored. L'ilei nishmat. It's a dedicated loving memory of Lila Nishmat, Amy Haber, Gittel Bracha bat Alta Leah, Alav Shalom, an amazing mother, wife, daughter, and friend during the week of Azkara by Jimmy and Nathan Haber. Okay, so we are in the middle of having a very interesting conversation about the neshama and different elements of the spiritual world that impact the physical world that we live in. Okay, so all of creation is endowed with certain physical properties. And those properties define and make up the physical makeup of that item. Okay, so I just wanted to hold on a second. I just want to say hello to people on Instagram and welcome them to the conversation. Pleasure seeing all of you in the morning. Okay, so now, in addition to all the physical properties, every creation also contains a metaphysical property or forces that endow it with life, that give it power. It allows it to exist. And the collection of all these forces are called a soul. So the more elevated and sophisticated the creation, the more elevated and complex its soul structure is. So last week we spoke about the four primary groups of physical creations. Our Chachamim also identified four primary metaphysical forces in the world. Okay, so the first and the most elementary force is found in every creation, and it is that which gives everything the power to exist. Without it, a being cannot exist. No, nothing. There's nothing in the world that exists without it. It's called the existence force. It's not discussed often. You don't really find it in many places. You'll find it mentioned in Rav Shneur Zalman of Ladi in his Shari HaYichud in V'ha'amunah in the first chapter. He speaks a little bit about it over there, but very few people actually talk about this. I think it's very hard to describe at some point when we break things down to metaphysical things, words become clumsy, and there's no real way to explain it in a way that's meaningful, which is why I believe there's very little written about it. Okay, but there are other places where you find the other forces mentioned more clearly. For example, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in Spain, 1141, in his epic magnus opus work called the Kuzari, and he has this dialogue between the Kuzari, which is a Jewish sage, and a Khazar king, and they're having this conversation regarding the essence of man and mankind. And the Chacham refers to three metaphysical properties found in various beings of creation. And this is important to us because this is all part and parcel of our conversation of the soul. Okay. So the first force that the Kuzari discusses is called Inyan Hativi, what we call the living force. Okay, and that's the natural force, the natural drive to acquire food, nourishment. It's what forces us to grow, to go through physical growth and development. It gives us the ability to procreate. It gives us the desire to engage in other natural activities. And the Chacham continues and tells us that the force is especially pronounced in plant life and in the animal kingdom, but not found in inanimate creation, such as the earth, stones, mountains, other kinds of objects that don't have any kind of movement and growth. They are what you see. Okay, then you have the king continues, and he says, yes, it's true that this force actually exists. And the Chacham goes on to describe something else called Inyan HaNefshi, which is a animated force. And the animated force is a force which is pronounced specifically in the animal kingdom, and it accounts for mobility. It accounts for the desires. It accounts for the emotions. And the last of these forces is called the intellectual force, or Inyan HaSichli. And this force is unique to the human species, human beings on planet Earth. It gives man the ability to improve his character, the ability to improve his traits, to better his society, and leads him to develop a proper behavior, give him etiquette, morality, and so on and so forth. Now, each of these forces and their unique abilities are primarily associated with one of the four groups of creation. Okay. So there's and I made a chart for everyone today to see this. I worked on it this morning. Let's see if you guys could see this. I don't know how this will come out on your screens, but I made a chart for you, and let's see if this works. Hold on a second. Here we go. Okay. So this is my chart. Okay. I don't know if you want this chart, by the way, at any point. I'm happy you can't see it over here, but I have a chart. No, you're not getting my chart at all. You're getting it over here, but not over here. All right. So you have a basic ideas like this. This is the structure. Okay. The structure looks like this. You have the most basic force is called the existence force, and it is the domain of the forces of inanimate objects. Okay. Then you have a second force, which is called the vegetative force, nefesh atzomchot, right? All those things that are that grow and sprout. Okay. And that's a dominant force in plants, and it accounts for their elevation over all kind of inanimate objects. The third force is called the animalistic force, or nefesh abihimit. Okay, the nefesh abihimit is the dominant force in the animals and accounts for their elevation over the plants and their emotions, and that's where those things come from. And lastly, the force which we find in human beings is called nefesh asichlit, the intellectual force, and it is the domain. It's the dominant force that we find in man, and accounts for his power to be elevated over everything else in creation. This is what separates us from creation. Now, we spoke about this idea that there are hierarchy in creation. There's a hierarchy in the world of souls. And therefore, the hierarchy isn't a rung that is separate from what preceded it. So when we talk about the lowest force, which is the existence force, you'll find that in the nefesh atzmachot, and you'll find that in the nefesh abihimit, and you'll find that in the nefesh asichlit. Everything that leads up to the nefesh asichlit, which is the intellectual force, is a combination of everything that precedes it. So you have all of these forces are woven into this other aspect of our soul. So, and therefore, we're going to see similarities in those realms that define a human characteristic. So we talk about growth. Okay, so growth comes from the vegetative force, right? It allows us to grow, and therefore that DNA, so to speak, from the vegetation force, what we find in a spiritual force within us as well. All these things are kind of interwoven. Now we know that there's 4 divisions, 4 groups, and one is more elevated than the other, and every single one of those objects are intermingled with the other. So you have the most basics, the existence force, and that is found in all of creation. And man's complex soul is made up of the 3 primary forces that come after that. So man has the vegetative force in him. He has, which gives life to the physical body. It grants him the ability to grow. It enables him to consume food and nourishment. The second force is the animalistic force, and that gives him the power of mobility. It's the source of his emotions, his desires. The third force is intellectual force. The force is not found in the animal realm. It's not found in the plant realm. It's an extra faculty that elevates man over the rest of creation. And it is this first manifestation of the neshama that we are going to be trying to explore over the next couple of weeks together. Now, in some sources, these 3 forces have different names. Okay, and this you'll find more in the refined Kabbalistic terms. They'll change these ideas and give it new names, because Kabbalah wasn't defined. These ideas were written again in the 10th and 11th century, and you'll see this again rewritten in the 15th century. So the Arizal called it something different. He says it in the way of nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Okay, nefesh is the part of the vegetative force. You have the ruach, which is the animalistic force. Ruach literally means like moving, right? The elevated force, which is called neshama or neshima. Okay, so you have these 4 different forces that are all here. Now, all of these forces, even the intellectual force, are all closely related to the physical world. Okay, everything that is happening on a spiritual plane is automatically going to be somehow paralleled to a spiritual and physical plane. There's this duality. They're all interconnected. So therefore, the vegetative force finds expression in the anatomic construction of, of things, whereas the animalistic force is where you find man's passions and emotions. And the intellectual force is where you're going to find man's thinking and reasoning. Therefore, the Jewish, sources associate these forces with different organs as well. Because if everything has a physical expression, then how do we find these expressions in mankind? There's actually a great book called The Anatomy of the Soul by Rav Nachman of Breslov, who goes through these things in much, much detail. I'm not doing that here with you guys. I'm just trying to give you a breakdown of the ideas in a way that's more palatable and easier to comprehend. So you have these four different forces. Okay, you have the intellectual, you have the lowest vegetative force, which is the nefesh hatzmachot, right? And that's the nefesh, and that's where we find action take place, and that's in the liver. That's in the liver, the kaved. Then you have the rung above that. You have the ruach, or the nefesh habehimi, the animal force, and that's the lev, that's the heart, and that faculty is actually associated with speech. This is why, God forbid, if someone goes through a stroke, heart attack, sometimes they have a hard time with their speech. There's a connection there. There's nefesh sichlit, which is the brain, the neshama, and that is the moach, and that is where thought is happening. So according to these associations, the physical structure of man parallels the makeup of his metaphysical forces. His head, which houses the most elevated force, that's up here, that's the intellect, is situated on top of his body. And therefore, we understand that everything that's happening up here is greater than everything that happens all the way down there. Below the head is the heart, right, which is the seat of his passion, emotion, desire. And below the man's heart is the liver, and that's where movement and so on and so forth takes place. Okay. So what is the nature of the intellectual force? Do animals have that force? Do they have mental capabilities? Is the human intelligence just, more sophisticated from an animal intelligence? What intellectual abilities did God give man that account for his occupying an inherently distinct level in the chain of souls? So Rashi, in his commentary on the Chumash, says that when in the pasuk where it says that God, we were created Tselem Elokim, and he suggests that what's unique about us is that we understand and we have the power of conceptualizing, lahavin ulhaskil. While animals have a brain, right, and they have a level of instinctual intelligence, they're unable to understand and conceptualize like man does. That's what makes us uniquely different. And now this also, I think, explains Harambam, who says that animals are able to think, but don't have understanding. They don't have de'ah. Okay, it's specifically human understanding and conceptualization that separates us from the animal world, the nefesh habehimi. Now, what does it mean to understand and conceptualize? On the most basic level, man is given is endowed with the most sophisticated cognitive abilities. Cognition, thinking, is the faculty that allows for the processing of information. It's the sensory input, and it accounts for all kinds of utilization of all kinds of application for such data. So mankind has this cognitive capabilities, okay, and therefore we're going to assume that he has a highly developed and sophisticated form of this cognition. Okay. Now, man has the ability to consciously engage his cognitive abilities. We have the power to think about thinking. We could think about thinking. We could think about our own thoughts. Animals can't do that. Okay. They, maybe they have some problem-solving skills. They have memory. They have association skills. But that is not what cognitive activity is. Okay, animals don't have those abilities at all. Conscious is a highly form of cognition of man that is not the sole intellectual faculty or even the most significant intellectual faculty that distinguishes man from the rest of creations. Man's elevated status comes from another form of intelligence. It's called abstract thinking, that I can believe in something that's not there, that I can go ahead and recognize that there is an infinite being, that the fact that infinity exists for mankind, and that animals can't think in terms of infinity, and you and I can. We can connect to the infinite. We can use our thoughts to get there. Animals can't do that. Animals live in a world of the instinctual intellect, and that is limited to things that are very pragmatic, such as the avoidance of pain, attraction, passion, and so on and so forth. Now, because man has the ability to think abstractly, he can operate on a theoretical level and engage in all kinds of mental imagery. It's called dimyon, imagination. Now, he could transcend the superficial perception that you and I have of reality. He could anticipate results, he could forecast, and he could identify the underlying principles of the world around him. Albert Einstein could think about a black hole and the properties of a black hole without ever seeing a black hole, which is mind-boggling, that he came up with the theories and the laws for the universe, for quantum mechanics, without having touched it, seen it, or feel it. That conceptualization is what makes us human beings. And therefore, the intellectual force in man has the ability to use his mind to think about abstract theoretical things. Okay, and this is what the Rambam speaks about, Hadeyot HaYetera, this special level of conception and understanding. Okay, this intellect is what distinguishes mankind from every other life force on planet Earth. Okay, and the meaning of the intellect is the ability to form in his mind conceptual thought and ideas. It's so funny because, like, as I'm speaking out these ideas, this concept that you, my friends, are created in this high level of intellectual capacity, right, is something that the world is rejecting today. We're rejecting the intellectual force, and we're saying, no, relate to the animalistic force, the emotional force. That is what it means to live in a post-truth world. Ignore the intellect and just accept the nefesh bihimit. As Jews, we reject this idea. It's all about elevating the mind. How do I become a deeper thinking, solving problem individual? That I don't allow my emotions to get the best of me, that I don't allow the world around me to define my existence, my emotions to define my existence, but my intellect. That is the key over here. So what makes man great comes from his ability to understand and conceptualize. Okay? Now, so how do we break this down for a minute? Okay, so abstract thinking is expressed in the ability to ponder from a philosophical perspective, let's say. Okay? He has philosophical thought, he has philosophical thinking patterns, he could contemplate the meaning of life, he could talk about morality, he could think about his own existence, whether or not he exists. Are we just living in a simulation? Are there aliens? All of these things are thoughts that animals and plants certainly don't worry about. Okay? Now, our ability to see beyond the superficial is reflected in our perception and appreciation of excellence, our appreciation of the majesty and beauty. A person is able to see people, objects in a greater context. Okay, animals can't do that. Now, a second expression of man's emotional intelligence is man's emotional intelligence. Animals have emotions and passions, but they are instinctual and not calculated. Okay, animals can express emotion, but only mankind has the ability to understand the emotions. Does a dog understand that he is depressed? Does a dog understand that he's going through psychological issues? No, they don't understand it. We have the ability of not only having emotions, but we have the ability of understanding the emotions. He can decipher the fear, the pain, the joy, and respond with words of reassurance, empathy, and excitement. Man can also manage it. He manages emotions. He can suppress it at times. Okay? Man has the ability of using his emotions to build meaningful relationships. Animals don't have that. A dog will find one dog and another dog and go from dog to dog all day, right? There's no commitment to a dog. Okay, but lastly, there's something called moral intelligence. Okay, and this enables man to understand concepts like justice, kindness, cruelty, respect. Moral intelligence um, is about building noble character. It's about self-control. It's about boundaries. Okay, it's about avoiding moral decadence. It's about avoiding excessive indulgence. Okay, dogs don't understand that. They're going to indulge as much as they can. So humanity is endowed with this power of utilizing moral thinking. We could identify what is right, what is wrong, and we can make moral judgments. Now, these different forms of intelligences are some of the primary expressions of the intellectual force. The ability to utilize the mind to acquire wisdom, whether through sophisticated, conscious, cognitive thinking or abstract thought in the philosophic, emotional, or moral realm, is part of the differences that, or the things that differentiate man from the animal. Okay, now there's one other part here that I want to mention that makes us different. It's not just the intellectual force. It's also something called bechira, for our free will. Okay, a neshama has an intellectual force to it, and that's the power to understand and conceptualize. But it's also, remember, it comes from this idea of the image of God. And the image of God means the power to make free-willed decisions without instinctual influences, but rather based on will and intellect. That is what is meant when we say B'Tselem Elokim, using our bechira. Okay. Now, the image of God is man's free will, and that is the unique quality that was given to man at his creation. Now, but what exactly is it in man that gives him free will? So when we speak about man's intellect, we said there are two most significant aspects of his intellect. Is his unique intellectual ability, or his ability to use his mind consciously, not only instinctively, and his ability to think abstractly and theoretically, not just practically. Okay, man has an abstract mind that can consider all kinds of different perspectives. He could distinguish between things that he encounters, and he could classify the things that he sees. Man's ability to think abstract gives him the ability to think theoretically. He can see multiple options. He can come up with multiple solutions. Okay, in other words, a direct result of man receiving this unique and elevated intellectual force is that he becomes a free-willed being. The intellectual force what gives us our bechira. Okay, now, free will is what makes us more elevated than anything else on the planet Earth. Bechira, choice, is what makes you not a dog. Choice is what makes you not a cow. That you could exercise bechira, your intellect, think. You could use your intellect to do things outside of your animalistic desires. This is what it means to be created in the image of God. That you are not stuck in this, lower sphere of nefesh behimit or nefesh tzmachot. You could be something more, something bigger. Now, we spoke about that the neshama gives man more than just a elevated intellect. Okay, the neshama gives man bechira. A man is able to occupy this very lofty level in creation due to his unique intellectual abilities, and most importantly, the possession of his free will. Now, let's end today's conversation with the following, okay? Free will gives man the potential to do a tremendous amount of good, but God forbid, it also can be used in a very terrible, destructive way. Things that animals can't blow up planet Earth. Okay, animals can't cause tsunamis, can't cause nuclear waste. Human beings, my friends, can. Okay, and that's because we have free will. It's the first time in human history where we talk about, biblical Armageddons that can be caused not by a God, but by man. Okay, so the danger of having free will is not small, because it's very great, right? You can do all kinds of things, but not only destroy things on a physical plane, but also destroy things on a spiritual plane. So again, there is a hierarchy to man's soul. And what makes human beings unique, their soul unique, is the power to conceptualize and the power to have free will. This is what makes us human. God willing, next week I'm going to go through the different parts of the body and show what aspects of the soul are related to the body. I'll have a chart of like a human being with different organs in it, and we'll do that next week, God willing. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. So what's the takeaway today? The big takeaway from today's discussion is like this. We look at nature, and in nature, there's a hierarchy of creation. And each lower level of creation endows the higher aspects of creation, aspects of it. This is part of what Darwin, I think, saw in evolution, that lower organisms gave way for higher organisms. We see the same thing in a spiritual plane, that the lower spiritual things give rise to the higher spiritual thing. You are the apex spiritual being on planet Earth, and that, my friends, is the most powerful idea that I could share with you. What makes you unique is not just the intellect, not just the power to reason, it's the power to choose. Remember that you are incomplete until you choose to refine yourselves. It's okay to go ahead and be a vegetarian and live in a world closer to the vegetative state, but don't be a vegetable. It's okay to connect to the animals and the animal kingdom, but just remember, you're not an animal. You, my friends, are above that. How do you express your humanity? Is determined by two things. One, your ability to reason abstractly, and number two, your ability to make free will choices. And I'm going to argue a third part, to elevate your moral character. If you could do those three things, you become a human being. And to me, again, it doesn't matter where you're going, as long as you are growing, as long as you're developing, as long as you have a vision of your personal greatness, you will be blessed with all the blessings of the Torah. Lots of love, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I'll take questions now if you have any.